Welcome, Pewter Report readers, viewers, and listeners to a brand new edition of the Pewter Report podcast, an emergency podcast brought to you by Briargreaves Insurance. Protecting your assets starts with a company that you can count on. So whether it's auto, homeowners, flood, boaters, or business insurance, there's nobody better in the business to work with than the great people over at Briargreaves Insurance. So for more information about them, give them a call at 813-876-4166. That's 813-876-4166. And the reason why we're having a Bucs emergency podcast, it's because wide receivers Mike Evans and Jalen McMillan are back. The Bucs opened up the 21-day practice window for each of these receivers, and we were just at the walkthrough practice where we saw Jalen McMillan. He was standing out there. Mike Evans wasn't there yet, but all reports indicate that he will be out there when the media wasn't. So a lot of fun stuff to talk about on this emergency podcast. I'm your host, Matt Matera, live from the Advent Health Training Center. Joined with me is the face that runs the place, PewterReport.com, SR, Scott Reynolds. Scott, it's good to be talking about some positive news on this emergency podcast.
Yeah, these are the fun kind of emergency podcasts, the contract extensions, the players returning to action after being on injury reserve, rather than players going on injury reserve. Those aren't the fun ones. So these are the fun ones right here. And I think that the Buccaneer fan base's spirits got lifted a little bit with this news, right? It's something that has kind of been talked about and projected. And and now that it's here, that these receivers are back in action at practice today, the cavalry is still coming, right? We saw that on Sunday with the return of Hassan Reddick and Bucky Irving and Ben Bredesen and Jamel Dean. And here comes the second wave, right? So this is really good news, certainly for Baker Mayfield, as this passing game is trying to find its footing, Matt, since the bye week. Baker came out with the 3-touchdown game against the Patriots, but really only 1 touchdown in each of the last 3 weeks. The passing game's kind of stalled out and sputtered a little bit. 3 interceptions thrown by Baker in those games as well. 1 against the Bills, 2 against the Rams. But now, we're going to see what Jason Light and Todd Bowles and Baker Mayfield envisioned with this wide receiving core really kind of, getting the gang back together for the first time this year, because Jalen McMillan suffered that injury in the preseason, and he got to play a little bit with Emeka Egbuka during the preseason, but not Mike and Chris. Chris was still sidelined with that ankle injury. Mike was being held out for precautionary reasons. So for the first time, and I don't think it's going to be this Sunday, Matt. I don't think the Bucs are necessarily going to have these fellows return for this week, especially with only really having practices on Thursday and Friday in terms of running around. Wednesday is going to be a walkthrough practice, not just this Wednesday, but certainly there's not going to be a practice next Wednesday because
there isn't
because there's going to be a game on Thursday night. So we may not see these two until the Panthers game. I think would probably be the most likely time. Although if Mike Evans, because he's played this year, if he looks like he's ready to step in against the Falcons, it wouldn't surprise me if one or both of these players play against the Falcons, but I would be shocked if either played on Sunday against the Saints.
Yeah, because we have to remember when Chris Godwin Jr. was returning from his fibula injury, the second injury he had this season, and even when Bucky Irving was coming back from the shoulder and the ankle injury, they came back to practice about 2 weeks before they actually played in the game. So if you go on that same trajectory for Jalen McMillan, who hasn't even played at all this season, I imagine it'll have to take a little more time to ramp it up. I think that makes sense for Carolina. I would love if each of them, and it is a factor that they do play on Thursday next week versus just Sunday this week and then Sunday next week. But the fact they're playing on Thursday, I would love if Mike is able to go. I think it'd be fantastic if they were both able to play, because they have a very favorable matchup against the Saints coming up on Sunday, which we'll preview later at 4 o'clock on the Pewter Report podcast. But that Falcons game, too, I know Kirk Cousins dismantled the Bucs last year, but he's even more of a shell of his former self there this time around. It almost feels like that college football game where, you're a juggernaut, you're expected to compete for the college football playoff and the national championship, and you're playing middle of nowhere, Bumble, university. and like you should win 55-10. And I'm not saying
Right.
the NFL because it's it's that much more difficult.
Yeah.
But like the buzz, the juice, the energy of having these two wide receivers back, and to your point, they have not had Mike Evans, Chris Godwin Jr., Jalen McMillan, and Emeka Egbuka together in a regular season game at all this season. So as great as it will be for having Mike and Jalen back, I can't think enough about what this means for Emeka Egbuka and his ability to get even that much more open. Because last week I talked about how much the Bucs sorely missed Bucky Irving.
Right.
They really miss Mike Evans as well. That big body target and the defense putting all of their attention on him. So, this is great news. And while he wasn't out there for the walkthrough, I'm sure he'll be out there tomorrow. So it'll be fun to snag some pictures of him tomorrow when he's practicing.
Yeah.
Getting ready to return.
Yeah, this is really welcome news, and I think both of these players are ahead of schedule, right? I've kind of been dialed into the Jalen McMillan situation since he went in injured reserve at the start of the season, and the timetable that I was told was always going to be late December, that probably right towards the end of the season, hopeful for the playoffs, and he just kind of accelerated that timetable, right? And people heal differently. It's when you've got broken vertebrae in your neck and you've got these muscles and tendons that are strained. There's no formula for you're out 4 to 6 weeks or 3 to 4 months or whatever. It's as quick as your body heals, right? And the fact that he's young helps, right? Mm-hmm. And Mike Evans to have that surgery, and he elected to have the surgery, which would speed up the recovery process, and he was able to get that surgery done. Even he is probably a couple weeks ahead of schedule. Now, to your point, and I think you're exactly right. These two players may not actually play until Carolina in Charlotte, and that's 2 more games from now. So I think that's probably more realistic than them playing on a short week against the Falcons. Although Mike Evans, he loves playing against the Falcons. He has had big games against them. And if they take care of business against the Saints, you've got Kirk Cousins, who for whatever reason has Todd Bowles' number. The Falcons put up a ton of points in both of those games last year. And of course, the Buccaneers got the better of the Falcons in week 1, winning 23-20. But that was with Michael Penix Jr. at quarterback, not Kirk Cousins. And so, we'll see how Mike progresses. My guess would be that both he and Jalen could return for that Panthers game. But if Mike is saying, hey, I'm going to go against the Falcons on Thursday Night Football, that the competitive juices might just take over, and we might see Mike against the Falcons. That's just my guess. There's no, informed opinion there. This is just me speculating. But I know Mike, and I wouldn't be surprised if he tries to go for that Falcons game if he can.
And I wouldn't mind even if it's a situation where they have him on a pitch count for that game against Atlanta. I mean, we saw Chris Godwin, he was on a pitch count that his first return 2 weeks ago. And then, they essentially doubled his snap count percentage on Sunday when they beat the Arizona Cardinals. So I'm all in for, getting Mike's feet wet a little bit. Obviously, he's been in the league for a very long time. But having him play, I don't know, 25 snaps, whatever the case may be, maybe a little bit less than that, 20 snaps. Yeah. I don't see necessarily the harm in that. He's going to have to get, hit at one point or another. And plus, the way that Mike plays, let him get open, let him get out of bounds right after, let him, brace for the hit versus getting shellacked as soon as he touches the ball. So,
how about the red zone? If he's only on the field for red zone snaps against the Falcons, I'd be fine with that because we've seen Baker Mayfield struggle throwing fade passes, ill-advised fade passes to the likes of Sterling Shepard and Emeka Egbuka. This is the guy that you want to throw the fade pass to, the 6'5" guy that can go up and snag it with one hand.
By the way, we got a super chat from Brian Shucker. Thank you so much for this $20 super chat. Says, such awesome news today. Yes, absolutely. It is good news for the Bucs. And to that point about Mike, I would love for a game. Let's just say he does come against Atlanta. Cream school game, by the way. Mike Evans' stat line, it's like 5 catches, 25 yards. And you're like, that's not too much. But 5 touchdowns because they're all in the red zone.
Yeah.
I could see something like that happening. And yeah, Mike's had some big moments against the Carolina Panthers as well, especially with the game on the line, division on the line. So Mike has been known to show up in the big time moments. And there's no doubt about it, especially with Carolina's big win against the Rams on Sunday. It's going to be a huge game against Carolina. They don't have a game this week with a bye, and then they play the Saints as well. So it does make for a matchup where if the Bucs win out, and by that I mean against New Orleans and then Atlanta, then it's a win if you're in situation against the Panthers in 3 weeks.
Yeah, and it would be something if the Buccaneers just took care of business and won these 3 divisional games, starting with the Saints on Sunday, then that Falcons game in the creamsicle uniforms, break the curse. Like, let's do this, and get that primetime win. And then, you know what? We've talked about it, Matt, that Week 16 game at Carolina could be flexed to Sunday Night Football. The matchup currently for Week 16, if my memory serves me, is the Bengals at the Dolphins. And while both those teams are playing better, they still have below 500 records right now. That's not exactly a scintillating matchup where you have a divisional matchup here between 1 and 2, and either the Buccaneers could clinch the NFC South with a win at Carolina, or the Panthers could perhaps take over the lead with a win, or at least tie things up, depending on what happens over the next couple of games. So yeah, and also too, remember the NFL, when they're looking at these potential matchups and who to flex and all of that, last year's game was in overtime at Carolina, so it was a nail biter. So I wouldn't be surprised if Tampa Bay and Carolina Week 16 or Week 18, if one of those games ends up in primetime, because those contests are going to decide who wins this division.
Yeah, it's very much the case. And I'll go back to what Baker Mayfield said earlier, which is we're treating every single game like a playoff game. So, this is what we've talked about all season long. Just be patient. Just wait. The cavalry is on the way. And now those fruits are, they're ready to be taken out of the tree or the garden and everything like that, and ready to be enjoyed. And that's what we're getting.
Yeah. This comment here from Chairborn 88. So no chance for Mike to come back against the Saints. We'll know more from Todd Bowles within the hour. Todd Bowles will be addressing the media. We've seen enough Todd Bowles press conferences, Matt. We know what Todd's going to say. Today was a walkthrough. We'll see how these guys progress. I got to see him, do more than stand around and do walkthroughs to have an indication.
I won't feel good about it until he says on Friday afternoon, this guy's out, this guy's out, this guy's out. We'll see about him, him, and him.
Exactly.
Until he officially rules a couple people out, who knows? Maybe he'll play. Maybe he won't. That'd be a really nice surprise if he played on Sunday. But I'm not banking on. None of us are banking on Mike Evans playing.
I think what you said about Chris and Bucky makes a lot of sense. Those two players were eased back into the practices and practice for 2 weeks before suiting up in a game. And that just seems to make a lot of sense here, especially too, and it's important to note, Mike Evans is no spring chicken. He's 32 years old. He had a hamstring injury in week 3, right, against the Jets after scoring that touchdown. And then that sidelined him for a couple of weeks. And that's what you don't want to have happen, is you don't want to rush Mike back and literally have him practice a couple of times and then rush him out there. And then all of a sudden that hamstring, gets, popped again or strained again. And then now he's out for the Panthers game. He's out for the Dolphins game. He might be out for both Panthers games. That's what you don't want. So I think the Bucs have to be smart here and kind of count their blessings a little bit. It's like you got Chris Godwin back, and he is looking more like Chris Godwin from Sunday's performance than he did in any of those 3 previous games. Let's see him do that again, right? Let's see Bucky Irving bring more juice to the offense again, like he did on Sunday. And you have to look at these games and you have to sit there and say, they can probably beat the Saints. They should beat the Saints without Mike and Jalen, right?
Yeah,
they should beat the Saints. And they'll probably match up pretty well against the Falcons because the Falcons are really going nowhere fast. I mean, their season's going down the toilet. They lost to the Jets, right? So having said that, you want to be smart and you want to maybe preserve your big guns for the big games. And that's going to be starting in week 16 at Carolina.
It definitely is. We have a $2 super chat from the Real Maverick. Thank you very, very much. Says, any word on Kalijah Kancey, possibly?
Yes. I have. I'll break it right here. Kalijah Kancey probably won't be back by the end of the season. He has to make some real progress over the next couple of weeks. So could he be back for that week 18 game against the Panthers? Possibly. I was told probably not December, but maybe January. So take that for what it's worth. Probably not December, maybe January. Not definitely January, maybe January. And does that mean week 18 against the Panthers? Does that mean the first round of the playoffs? Does that mean, remember, it took Vita Vea
NFC Championship game in 2020 to come back fully from that broken leg. And they could have used him against Washington. That was a close wild card win against the Tyler Heineke's back in Washington in week 1. And then they even played the Saints in the divisional game at New Orleans without Vita Vea. So they didn't get Vita Vea back until that Packers game in the NFC Championship game. So might be a similar situation with Kalijah Kancey. So a little bit of breaking news for you there. Much more of an incentive for the Bucs to keep winning and go deeper into the postseason.
That's right.
Into late January.
I'll never forget what Bruce Arians told Vita Vea when they put him on injured reserve after that Bears game on Thursday night where he broke his leg. He said, Vita, you do your part and we're going to do our part. And let's meet up in the playoffs. And Vita got to rehabbing and the leg healed. And all of a sudden he's out there pushing the pocket, pushing Aaron Rodgers right into the waiting arms of Jason Pierre-Paul and Shaq Barrett. Yeah. And then the same thing with Patrick Mahomes a week later in the Super Bowl. So hopefully Kalijah Kancey can have that type of an impact if he can make it back in January. We'll see what happens. But we have another podcast today. We wanted to kind of get this good news out to you, Pewter people, right away, rather than make you wait to 4 o'clock to talk about it. So if you missed this show, well, we'll talk about it again. But we do have our traditional Wednesday preview podcast, and that is going to be coming up, the Bucs versus the Saints preview. This is another must-win game, folks. If they stub their toe against a 2-win team, if you thought you were feeling bad after maybe an uninspiring win against the Cardinals on Sunday, you're going to feel awful. But if you witness a Buccaneer win over the Saints, that means the Buccaneers will move a game and a half ahead of Carolina, who is idle with the bye week this week. So that will be some good news. The good news will continue because we have a Pewter Insider for our Pewter Platinum and Premier members this Friday at 1:30, right after practice. So you're going to find out, if you're a Pewter Insider, you're going to find out first who is in and out for Sunday's game against the Saints. And then Matt and I are going to be diving into this topic. Can the Bucs defense find its mojo again? Because the Bucs defense looked fantastic against the Saints in New Orleans. Then something happened over the bye week, and it just hasn't really been the same. Gave up a ton of points to the Patriots, to the Bills, to the Rams, and 17 points to the Cardinals. Some people feel like that's too much. Some people think, well, something's better than nothing in terms of improvement. But we're going to be tackling that topic on Friday's show. And then, of course, on Sunday, we'll have a podcast also on Thursday, topic to be determined. But then we've got the Pewter pregame show this Sunday, 9 o'clock. Matt and I will be talking Bucs versus Saints at 9 o'clock here on Pewter Report TV, our YouTube channel. And then Matt Matera and Daniel Morales kick things off for Pewter Game Day at 1 o'clock. So the podcasting is well underway this week on Pewter Report TV, and we've got another one coming up in just a few hours, Matt.
That's right. So in the meantime, if you're not already doing so, please make sure you follow us on all of our social media on X, Facebook, and Instagram. We're at Pewter Report. And our YouTube channel is Pewter Report TV. Please like and subscribe. Leave a comment on this video. How excited are you that Mike Evans and Jalen McMillan are returning to practice? And hopefully we'll be playing in a game quite soon.
Yep.
That'll do it for us this afternoon. For Scott Reynolds, I'm Matt Matera saying thanks everyone for watching. We'll see you later at 4 p.m. for another edition of the Pewter Report podcast.